Back to this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Brody. I am joined alongside my co-host and good friend London Beth. And today we are hitting on the Chicago Bears and their new defensive coordinator, Sean Desai. Yes, we got the name right. Look it up. Go back. Don't roast us in the comments. We got it right this time. And what he is bringing to the table for a very, very talented Bears defensive team. A lot of people have played under Desai while he was an assistant to Vic Fangio, but we'll get into that in a minute. But before we begin, a word from our sponsor, Higher Level Camps.
HLC is the longest running boys and girls AAU basketball program in the state of Wisconsin. HLC was established in 1995 by their founder and retired WNBA player Cheryl Moore. 27 years and counting. Cheryl, keep it up. For more information, visit higherlevelcamps.com and just say Just Another Year sent you.
All right, and we love Cheryl, though she is a Packers fan. But let's jump into it. The Chicago Bears promoted Sean Desai on January 22nd. So we're going way back at the time. It was Bears fans were still upset about the New Orleans Saints playoff loss. Still, they were in Super Bowl mode. Who were making money off of? Who was DraftKings? Who was listening to Tony's Take at the time? But Sean Desai was a defensive quality control coach for Vic Fangio. Now he's officially the defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, and a lot of people and players, staff are excited about this move. So let's break him down really fast before we start getting into a few things from us. He's been with the Bears since 2013. So he's been there through the Mark Trestman era, the John Fox era, and now the Matt Nagy era. Clearly a very likable guy, as usually coaching staffs get overhauled every time a head coach comes in. Sean Desai, on the other hand, ended up staying with the Chicago Bears, and players like Akeem Hicks, Eddie Jackson, Danny Trevathan, Khalil Mack are thrilled for what they heard when they heard the news back in early January that they were bringing Sean Desai as the head defensive coordinator after Chuck Pagano retired from the NFL. He's the first coach of Indian descent to become a coordinator in the NFL, so a historical and awesome feat for him. Very excited. He is very humble about it, though. He's like, hey, man, I'm just a guy out there trying to get the job done and win the Bears a Super Bowl, because what better way to win the Super Bowl than with your defense in Chicago? Though, we have talked plenty that our offense is better. We need to get that moving forward. But he is known as Vic Fangio 2.0 due to his close relationship with Vic during his time with the Chicago Bears. And he was a huge help on the 2018 defense, as many Bears fans know, was a very dominant defense, was considered a top 5 defense in the 2010 decade. Wow, that's a mouthful. Never going to say that one again. But again, one of the best defense of that decade. So, London, what was your reaction about this guy? Did you know much about him? Like, when you heard the name at first, were you like, huh, or awesome? Let's hear it.
Yeah, Nick, I was really excited back in January. I think it was good that we actually put it out there as an organization right away that we were getting a new defensive coordinator, just from our ex-defensive coordinator, I think, was just a filler. And it just what happened at the Saints and stuff like that, that was at least good news to start the offseason, which I think was something that the Chicago Bears fans needed. Okay. Going into Coach Sean, the biggest, most important thing that I want to say about him, and just to start off, is the Chicago Bears kind of sometime have an issue with letting young coordinators, young people go that go on to do great feats. For example, Brandon Stanley, who is now the defensive coordinator of the Rams in 2020, who led them to a top 5 defense, was on the Chicago Bears. He was one of the guys that would have got this job. And we let him go. He, of course, went on for the LA Rams to have a very good defensive year as the coordinator there. I was nervous about that. I was scared that this was going to be kind of what was going to happen with Sean, that he was going to go on. We weren't going to sign him. So it was great that we locked him in January. What have I been hearing, though, is if anybody wants to go out there, and you probably already saw these tweets, but maybe go get a refresher before training camp and the season starts, go look at what Sam Acho, linebacker who played for the Chicago Bears, talked about with Coach Sean. Like, it was brilliant. He talked about that he's a spitting image of Brandon Stanley, who Brandon Stanley had a top 10 or top 5 defense this past year. He went on to talk about coach's leadership, that he was pretty much the right-hand man to Vic Fangio for 4 years, and that he was actually a really, really vital part in 2018 for that number 1 defensive team in the NFL. More than people understand, because Vic Fangio, of course, kind of got all the, he had the sick, cool pictures, kind of the Godfather photos, and everybody loved him. But behind the scenes, Sean was doing a lot of the work that created that defense. That is something that was, something that was very prevalent from what Sam Ancho talked about on his Twitter. So go back there. I think it was like around the time, January 18th, I think were the tweets. Go back there and look at them. Read what he is talking about, because it's, like you said, Nick, that's exactly what is being said for current players and past players about this guy taking over the defensive reins of the Chicago Bears. And it's something that we should be extremely, extremely excited about, because if we can go back to 2018 with now a dynamic quarterback like Justin Fields at the helm, Super Bowl or bust, but we'll go on.
Yeah, optimism right there. Yeah, no, I didn't know much about this guy before he really got talked about. Obviously, he was mentioned, but Vic was the big name of that defense of coaching scheme back in 2018. A lot of people talked about it after he left. Chuck Pagano, like the defense took a huge step back in 2019, 2020. Pagano tried, but it just wasn't the same. It was more the players instead of the coaches getting the job done at that point. No, and nothing against Chuck Pagano. Fantastic story. Great guy. Awesome for the community.
Yeah.
No, there's no doubt about that. But he wasn't the type of defensive guy for these defensive players.
And I think after he fell to some illnesses and stuff like that, I'm not saying that was the reason why our defense faltered, but I think he was just closer to retirement than he was when he was with the Indianapolis Colts. Right. And I think his focus was more on his family, which it should be during those situations. Not taking it away, I still think he's a great coordinator, and I still think he was a great coach for the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears. I really haven't ever heard from past players anything bad about him. But it's time. We got to move on. And honestly, Mark Trestman did absolutely nothing for the Chicago Bears, but find this guy from, I think, Boston College. So kudos to Mark. I've never gave Mark Trestman any sort of kudos. This is that one time.
And so, yes, I mean, and Ryan Pace, you have to think about it. Vic Fangio was a part of the Bears for a long time. And Ryan Pace built this defense around players that Vic needed. This defense was not built around Pagano because, like you said, Pagano was more of a filler until he found that answer to get another Vic Fangio, and it was internally all along. But, you bring in a guy like Chuck Pagano, teams have to plan against, okay, this guy is, done well in the NFL. He's been around the NFL for a long time, so he has the knowledge for it. But kind of like, what does Sean Desai bring to the table? As stated before, he is the Vic Fangio 2.0. Players are calling him that. Super excited due to his close relationship with Fangio while he worked under him. And Vic Fangio even has plenty of good words to say about Sean Desai. He said, quote, he was a huge part of the defense's success and wishes nothing but the best for him in the Chicago Bears. Vic Fangio is currently the head coach of the Denver Broncos after leaving the Chicago Bears after the 2018 season. The double doink pretty much just shut the door on Fangio, just be like, hey, I want to go be a head coach somewhere. And, the one person that wasn't young amongst this defensive unit was probably Vic Fangio, a.k.a. that's why we called him the Godfather. So he has a very similar, defensive aggressiveness and defensive scheme like Vic Fangio. And a lot of Bears defensive players currently like that. Eddie Jackson said, I can finally go out and get the ball. That's what I can go do. That's what Eddie Jackson's known for. And people are like, why is he not going after interceptions or balls in the air? Why is he not doing this? Why is he not doing that anymore? It's because Eddie Jackson's best years were under a guy like Vic Fangio. His worst years were under a guy like Chuck Pagano because Chuck Pagano was too conservative. He was too afraid of what was next. And I will give Pagano that there was no confidence in the offense. And now that the offense is actually looking like a legitimate unit, and I'm not saying we're top 5, we're not, New England Patriots from 2000 to, 2 years ago status, but we are definitely on the uprise in regards to that. But, Sean Desai attacked the ball at all costs. Man-to-man coverage, I respect the hell out of that. We have a lot of good DBs. Obviously, we don't have Kyle Fuller anymore. But, Jalen Johnson looks amazing so far from the video from this offseason.
Yeah, go check out his Twitter. He looks,
just go check out his Twitter.
Nuts.
He looks lean.
Built.
He looks built. I mean, he just looks like a straight badass, and he just wants to go out there and hit something. He wants to go out there and hit somebody. He wants to hit another, Adam Lazard on the Packers. He just wants to pop someone else just like him. And then finally, Sean Desai is going to attack the quarterback every single play. And that's something that London and I really, really want to hit on, is that this defensive unit, if you remember, in 2019 and 2020, Khalil Mack would drop back into coverage. Robert Quinn would drop back into coverage. When you have guys like Roquan Smith and at the time, a younger Danny Trevathan with the speed, and Nick Chawaz, I'm sorry, I can't say his name. The linebacker that we had, Nick, London, help me out here. 44. All right, we're going to forget it.
The Raiders guy.
The Raiders guy.
Nick
Kowalski or whatever. Kowalski. We're going to get absolutely
like
fucking torched. And excuse my French. We're going to get torched for that one. But he was a fast linebacker, and we had that. But he had Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack dropping back into coverage, which is completely not the way to go about this. They're not as fast as a linebacker. They are guys to go after the football, and that's what you pay Khalil Mack to do. That's what you pay Robert Quinn to do. And yes, Robert Quinn had an injury this past year. A lot of Bears fans were upset about him. Alex Brown is saying look out for Robert Quinn this year. I could not agree more. Go look back at a couple of past episodes of people to look out for, as London and I have Robert Quinn as breakout player of mandatory training camp. But again, I think that this is going to be the Bears defense that we knew in 2018. And it has to be, because a lot of these guys are getting orders. So London, what are you looking for most out of Sean Desai's defense?
Yeah. So it's actually not the philosophy or it is the philosophy, but it's not actually the way in which he's going to use players or schemes or man or zone or all that kind of different stuff. Everybody knows what's going to happen, okay? In 2018, we blitzed the quarterback heavily, but we got to the quarterback a lot, okay? We had our highest sack totals in 2018 since we haven't even came close to that, and that really showed, because in today's NFL, you have to get pressure on the quarterback. It is a passing league. You have to get pressure on the quarterback. Look what happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. He was running for his life. Their offense couldn't get settled due to that. And even though Patrick Mahomes is such an escape artist and has those abilities to make those absolutely ridiculous throws, when you have 2 6'5", 300-pound men chasing you every single play, it's over. The game's over. You lost. The biggest things that I think Coach Sean is going to bring is outside of football. Okay. When he went to Boston University, he studied ancient philosophy. Okay. He's studying, East Asian philosophy. Okay. And he talks a lot about how that kind of wisdom of history, kind of giving himself that kind of old soul mentality, even though he is such a young coordinator in the NFL, I think it's something that's actually very important. There are a lot of veterans on this team. You have, like you said, Khalil Mack, you have Robert Quinn, you have Akeem Hicks. You have players like that demand so much out of their defensive coordinator because they've been in the league for so long, and Sean is so young coming into the league. I think that kind of old soul through his studies, being a teacher at heart, is a big thing that I know Sean talks about, is he considers himself not a defensive coordinator. He considers himself a teacher. That is something so important to our team, especially for our young up and coming players like Roquan Smith. Having that kind of educator in their corner, I think, is so huge. Now, granted, everything to do with his schemes and everything are absolutely great, but I think the really, really big thing that a lot of Chicago Bears fans will kind of overstep or overlook or all that kind of different stuff is that he's a teacher first. I mean, he's literally a professor at Lake Forest College in his off time. I mean, that is just so awesome to have as a defensive coordinator.
Constantly teaching, constantly motivating. I think that's totally what you need, especially out of a guy with a lot of pressure on his shoulders.
Yeah.
He does have big shoes to fill because he is being given a very talented defensive roster.
Yep.
Yes, you lost Kyle Fuller. But I think what Bears fans need to do is stop and go, we have 6 other Pro Bowlers on that roster. Just calm down. It's one guy. And then people are going to go, yes, but it's so important. Just give it time. The Bears are known for developing defensive backs. Look at Charles Tillman. Look at Tim Jennings. Look at Deion Bush. I mean, like, there's just the Bears do have defensive guys. So just relax. And I couldn't agree more. And he's going to teach them. I think it's so cool how involved he is with the Lake Forest community. That is where Hallis Hall is located, if no one knows that. But I think it's so important. So, London, before we get into our fun question at the end of the day, let's finish up on Coach Desai before. What are your predictions of him for this year?
So if you look at all of the defensive coordinators, Nick, in the NFC North, okay, so it's Coach Sean Desai for the Chicago Bears. It's Aaron Glenn for the Detroit Lions. It's Joe Barry for the Green Bay Packers. And then for the Minnesota Vikings, they have Andre Patterson and Mike Zimmer's, I think, son or nephew. I'm not exactly sure. Adam Zimmer. Okay. So if you look at that list out of all those defensive coordinators in the NFC North, even I think Joe Barry's new, and I think Aaron Glenn for the Detroit Lions is also new. I think the only
they did a full revamp.
I think the only real returning people are Andre Patterson and Adam Zimmer for the Minnesota Vikings. So if you look at that list, I'm taking Coach Desai over every single one of them. I actually am taking them over Andre Patterson and Adam Zimmer. So if you look at the NFC North, you look at the players we have, and now I'm taking him as the best defensive coordinator in the NFC North. I think that is so vitally important. So my predictions, though, kind of go with what you see from his resume. Okay, so he went from the University of Miami. He was the director of football operations there, and then he went to Boston College. Then he went to the Chicago Bears. So, Nick, I did a little research. I have a few cousins that have gone to Miami, Florida for college. And so I was like, I wonder what it was like back in 2011, 2012, when he was there, what kind of players were around, how did they look? So following the Miami Hurricanes, when he was the director of football operations there, they were actually not a very good team. Okay. They were a 5-7, 6-6 team in the ACC. From 2011, they went 7-5. They had players like Oliver Vernon, Lamar Miller, who was actually on the Chicago Bears roster, Travis Benjamin for the Chargers, Ray Armstrong, who I know played, and Denzel Perryman, who is a middle linebacker now for the Chargers also. I think he had some injury problems. So they had some NFL talent there. So from 2010, when they were in literally complete rebuild in Miami, 2011 and 12, they actually started to win. They went 5-7. And then the next year they went 9-4. He left, went to a very, very bad, struggling Boston College. Miami continued to uptake from whatever he implemented there as the director of football operations, which is a very, very, very important position at a university. I mean, you have your hand in recruiting, coaching, everything. I mean, staff, everything. Whatever he did, they went on to continue to build from that to, I think, the 2017 or 18 season, where they were absolutely dominant. I think they blew out Notre Dame in that big primetime game, kind of fell apart in the end, lost to Pittsburgh. But everybody was like, oh my gosh, the Hurricanes are back through that. So if you kind of look at that timeline, he came to the Chicago Bears. He was a safety coach. We brought in Deion Bush, who he actually brought into the Miami Hurricanes way back in 2012 or something when he was a freshman. And the way he's kind of produced that, I don't expect anything less. I expect, for my prediction, that through him having so many different avenues, being a running back coach, being a director of football operations for a huge college, being a safety coach, being a special teams coach, and now being the best defensive coordinator in the NFC North, I expect us to get back on track. I expect him to blitz and get to the quarterback a ton this year. And I think Khalil Mack's going to have a field day. A lot of people on social media, through all these edge rusher things on PFF and stuff. They've kind of been sleeping on Khalil Mack a little bit. I think Khalil Mack, I know we've already talked about Robert Quinn. I think those two guys are going to have a really, really big year, especially if Eddie Goldman gets his head together and, is there for this season. And I expect Coach Sean to just absolutely dominate and be the best defensive coordinator in the NFC North.
And it looks like, just going off the Eddie Goldman comment really fast, it looks like he is coming back. There was video released yesterday of him just absolutely repping out 245s on each side, so 225 pounds with resistance bands and just pumping. When a big man's moving that kind of weight, he's not doing that while he's in retirement. He's doing that because he's going to play some football.
Yeah.
And so, kind of my prediction going off the side, I think he's going to do well. I think he has, Players already like him. Players already know him. That's a huge advantage because they already have the respect for him as a coach and as a friend. But also, he's a leader. He's in for the ride. He is ready for this. He can be a strong leader for this defense right out of the gate. That's what the Bears have been missing. You know, the defense in 2018 loved Fangio. I mean, they literally were like, Vic, they're taking pictures with him. Vic has cigars in his mouth. Like, he's a Club Dub, by far the oldest guy in Club Dub, and he's partying just as hard. So I think, like, you know, and Sean Desai is obviously a much younger guy than Vic Fangio. Nothing against his age, but he's going to be able to, you know, really, mesh well with this team like he already has. And kind of like you were saying, the Bears offense is already better than 2018. There is no doubt about that. And Justin Fields hasn't even touched the field. We have a kicker. We have a legitimate kicker now. We don't have Cody Parkey. I don't even want to say his name, but I said it. And if you have a guy who can lead and unlock the full potential again of that defense, it's going to be a good year. I'm not saying Super Bowl or bust, but I'm saying it's going to be – I feel like the Bears are in for a very good season coming up. And I hope fans realize Sean Desai is a very, very good pickup, not even pickup, but good fill for the Chicago Bears defense. Yeah. And I'm very excited for it. But London, final question. And as it's not Bears related, so, you know, this is Fun Friday question. You know, we're going to start that segment right now. Fun Friday question. Is Closing Time by Semisonic a sad or happy song?
I'm going to sad song. I know we talked about this off air. I'm going to sad song. Back when we were in college, that was the song that the bars played every single time when they were kicking us out, you know, it was last call. So it was always a sad time because, you know, we were either there for a football game or a basketball game or something like that. So that meant, you know, staying there late, of course, because somebody won or somebody lost. So you can drink either way. So to me, sad song.
You know what? I agree it's a sad song. I agree it can be a sad song, but it can also be a happy song. Like, there's something about the beat where you're just like, all right, like, you know, we could all sing together. And like, you know, sometimes I remember my senior year, the last night everyone went out before they graduated or when graduation started, all the bars played it at the same time. Everyone's arms are locked. You're happy that don't be sad that it's over. Be happy that it happened. Yeah. It was kind of that situation. So, you know, leave your comments below. Is Closing Time a happy or sad song? Has nothing to do with London. Yes.
One more thing just about the happy, before we get off this about the happy or sad song. To correct, it is Nick Kwiatkowski for the Raiders.
Nick Kwiatkowski.
Linebacker Nick Kwiatkowski. We didn't have him on our script. We weren't ever going to talk about him because, of course, he left us for the Raiders, and I'm very, very sad about it because I think he was a very good emerging player. But it killed me because he was actually this year, and I know Kinney would love this. Shout out to him for this. This year for Mutt, Nick was a really, really good linebacker in Mutt for like a ton of weeks. Nick Kwiatkowski. So everybody in there who thinks that we just butchered his name, I do know his name. It just wasn't coming to me.
Was not in the script. So I threw a curveball at both of ourselves. Both of us didn't even say it. So roast us all you want. If you made it to the end, though, you can't roast us anymore because we corrected ourselves. But with that, thank you very much for joining this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. Coach Sean Desai is the defensive coordinator for Chicago Bears.
Desai!
My name is Nick Desai. My name is Nick Rohde. I am joined alongside London Beth, and we will see you guys next time.